Now, in all seriousness, sweatshops are a very concerning issue in the world today. Virtually every developing nation employs workers for little to no pay while forcing long hours and dangerous conditions. Even developed nations have sweatshops in them, although these attempt to remain out of sight and out of mind. Due to common stereotypes, we must first define what a sweatshop is. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary offers the definition of a sweatshop as a shop or factory in which employees work long hours at low wages and under unhealthy working conditions. Modern sweatshops of this description can be traced back to homework or outwork systems of the mid-1800s. The emerging textile industry during this time allowed for rural populations to make products that large companies would then pay for. Manufacturers would often pay people by the piece or by the day, creating conditions in which homeworkers as young as 5 years old would work 14 to 18 hours. As the 19th century progressed, manufacturers began to realize that they could control the cost of production as well as make a greater profit if the homeworker system were put into a more mass production environment. This idea is not only where we get our modern form of the factory, but also the start of modern sweatshops. Many of these early sweatshop factories were in New York City, where an estimated 60,000 children worked in the textile industry alone. In London, where the garment industry was large, young women would work 12 hours a day, Monday through Friday. Legislature in both the United States and England, as well as the foundation and formation of labor unions, started to improve working conditions and slowly began to diminish sweatshops. This led manufacturers to face a small crisis, for their once cheap cost of production was suddenly starting to rise. They therefore looked to other countries to set up shop, countries that would not be so quick to protect their people from hardships. While they found many such places, one nation in particular would become the largest exporter of goods to date. This country, of course, is China. Before opening up its economy in 1978, China had some of the strictest control on the movement of their people. After the transition from a communist to a market economy, however, much of the rural population moved into the city to find work at factories. They were greeted by some of the same conditions that had existed more than a century before elsewhere. The Chinese are currently paid some of the lowest wages in the world, while working the longest hours to make the most products. Safety conditions are equally as ridiculous. In one Chinese cutlery factory, for example, over one-fourth of the workers are maimed or injured. Many still work in these unsafe conditions, for they cannot find labor elsewhere due to their injuries. Hourly wages are often complicated in determining due to unpaid overtime, pay deductions, production bonuses, or complex pay stubs. This makes it difficult for workers to determine whether they have been paid correctly or not. Pay deductions come in many forms. For example, a Nike plant deducts up to 40% of a worker's pay for using the toilet more than once a day. While China does have labor laws in place, many of these are violated by corruption and deception. There are countless stories of managers in factories forging documents and payrolls to meet the standards so they can fool the authorities investigating. Constant demands by U.S. companies means the factories must increase output while at the same time lowering cost. This allows American consumers to enjoy inexpensive clothes, electronics, and sneakers, but forces the Chinese manufacturers to cheat the system to meet demands. This only adds to the already dangerous and unhealthy working conditions. Now you're most likely wondering, so what? What does this actually have to do with me? Well, frankly, that all depends on how you view your life. I doubt anyone actually thinks that the iPhone they have or the Adidas shoes they're wearing were made by some young Chinese kid who roughly makes in a month what you paid for those shoes. However, this might actually be the case. The best thing for the American consumer to do is to be aware of the issues in the world today. If you honestly want to boycott Walmart and make your own clothing, by all means, go ahead. To take this extreme is obviously better than the opposite one. Having a mindset that we cannot win against capitalism, therefore we should not fight, means we should basically stop trying to fight any wrong in the world today. Being actively aware of what is going on around you and being ready to fight injustice is the best approach to absolving sweatshops. The image you are now viewing is another example of how not to approach sweatshops. This is an image from a game called simply Sweatshop. In it, the player takes control of a sweatshop by hiring workers of different ethnic backgrounds and making the most profit. Between levels, the game displays information of real-world sweatshops, such as in Mexico for this example. It is almost depressing that this is the only way to get the attention of our generation. The creators of the game wish to bring attention to current issues, but their valiant idea is warped through execution. We must always be aware that the things we use every day were made by someone, and this someone might have just made that in a sweatshop.